So, your new book, Who Are We? Reflections on My Life in Canada, and it's a memoir and a manifesto, right? What process did you go through to write it, and what are the defining policies within it that will form the centrepiece of the Green Party's manifesto for the next election?
Well, what I really wanted, and of course it's personal, it's not the Green Party's. Nobody saw it in the Green Party before it was published, but
Sure.
I love writing. This is my 8th book. And I really wanted to write a policy book that picked up where my last book left off, which was Losing Confidence, the crisis in Canadian democracy. And unfortunately, I couldn't find a publisher interested in a policy book, or maybe fortunately. Anyway, my publisher, it's the first book I've done with Greystone, and they really wanted it to be an autobiography with no policy.
Sure.
So we had this kind of struggle. So it's ended up being a hybrid. And so I really wanted to ensure that in the book I talk about what I've learned over a long time. I'm 60 now, so my assessment of what economics is really about and how you make economics work for a healthy society. What our role is in foreign policy, so it's broader than environment and climate only, although climate is a consistent thread through the book. I also wanted to talk about the real threat to Canadian democracy, and when I look back at the book I wrote, that was the 7th book that I've written, it came out in 2009, and here we are in 2014, and everything's much worse. Stephen Harper has concentrated even more the power he has as Prime Minister. So there were a bunch of reasons working together to say, before the next election, I want Canadians to be thinking about two things. How do we rescue democracy? And how do we use the tools of a healthy democracy to avoid catastrophic climate impacts? Both of which I think we can do. So it's ultimately an optimistic book.
So, I guess it's the culmination of your political career.
Yeah.
This book.
Yeah, so my partisan political career began quite late. I didn't even join a political party till 8 years ago when I joined the Green Party to run for leader. But my life as a grassroots community activist around environmental issues has been more typified the work I did. Well, now I've been a lawyer, done different things. I've worked in government before in the 1980s. But all of the pieces of how I would describe myself as what I'm doing to make a living at the moment has always been within the context of what do I need to do right now to advance protection of environment, human health, and other things that preoccupy me.
Sure. So, it charts your rise to the position you're in today, and you're one of the few federally elected Green Party representatives actually in the world.
Well, there's tons in other countries, of course. There's tons in Germany and Sweden. Sweden right now has a coalition government with the Greens, and the vice prime minister of Sweden is Green, and the minister of environment in Sweden is Green, and Finland has a minister of environment is Green Party. But you're right, for Canada and the U.S., I mean, the U.S. has never managed to have a federally elected Green. Mexico has quite a few, but we only have 2 Green MPs right now in Parliament.
And that's the thing. Is it first past the post, which is stifling democracy? Is that the root?
It's a key reason that Canadians vote less than citizens in other countries, is the fear that my vote won't count, or that this riding, you hear it all the time, so well, this riding's a safe liberal riding, it doesn't matter who I vote for, it's always going to be a liberal who gets in, or go to Alberta and say it's always going to be a safe conservative riding. What I'm trying to do with the book is encourage people to believe that change is possible even under a dysfunctional voting system. But first past the post is a big part of the problem. And it also is the reason that political parties who are close to each other ideologically on the political spectrum are least likely to cooperate with each other.
Sure.
Because they don't want their supporters to think, oh, okay, so it's okay to vote for that other party, and I really want to block the worst party. So you end up having the most vicious attacks happening between the parties that are closest to each other on the political spectrum.
So, on a party political basis, will your party in the federal election be following the example of Caroline Lucas's Green Party in the UK? In the 2010 election, they really concentrated their resources in several constituencies and managed to win the Brighton Pavilion seat.
Yeah.
Will your party be following a similar electoral strategy?
Well, actually, we did follow Caroline Lucas's Brighton Pavilion strategy in 2011.
Okay.
I think it's the main reason I won my seat in Senate Gulf Islands. We had candidates in every riding across Canada, almost. We had 1 or 2 where we didn't get papers filed in time. But in 2011, we didn't so much focus just on my riding during the writ period, but we had done a lot before the writ period to work on my writing. So in the next election, yes, we're definitely going to focus attention, but not on one or two, but on quite a few, so that we can end up with what I hope will happen at the end of the next election is a minority parliament where the Green Party members of parliament have a balance of power to push through getting rid of first past the post and having a real climate plan.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's doable. It's really doable.
Sure. So here in Quebec particularly, there's widespread dissatisfaction. I don't need to tell you about this. What would your party, hypothetically, if you were to be in government, do to ensure both economic growth and environmental security?
Well, some of the hot button issues in Quebec, Energy East, drilling in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, we're the only party that opposes any oil and gas development in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and including the shipping of oil out of the St. Lawrence River. We've absolutely got to have a plan that is phasing out dependence on fossil fuels and looking at new energy sources that are much more sustainable. So we would be working to ensure right across Canada that we have a much stronger economy with many more value chains within it, much more small and medium-sized enterprises that are the biggest employers in Canada but get the least help.
And perhaps even pay the most taxes proportionally.
Yeah. And the bigger corporations now, the corporate tax rate, Harper set the corporate tax rate in Canada at half that in the United States, the lowest corporate tax rate anywhere in the world. We'd bring in place a way of pricing carbon called fee and dividend, where you charge the polluters for every ton of carbon they're emitting, and take it in, instead of taking it into the revenues of Canada to spend it, would go right back out to Canadians in individual checks to everybody. So that would also help alleviate poverty, because the individual check would mean a lot more. A $2,000 check is going to mean a lot more to someone making $24,000 a year than to someone making $200,000 a year, right? So we have a lot of social justice programs that are also tied into sustainability, and I think that they will create more jobs and protect what we have. I mean, the threat of oil and gas in the Gulf of St. Lawrence is threatening billions of dollars right now in tourism and fishing, but nobody talks about tourism and fishing. They act like they don't count if you could possibly get one well drilled in the Gulf of St. Lawrence.
It's overlooked, particularly the narrative.
It's absolutely, because Harper has set this course. Fracking, we absolutely oppose fracking anywhere. It's really important to
say. Similar thing in the UK right now. It's really
exactly. That's my only embarrassing comparison to Carolyn Lucas. I admire her so much for being arrested for protesting fracking, and I'm embarrassed to tell you I haven't yet been arrested, but I imagine I will.
I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you. So, I'm waiting for the right moment.
As we all. So, how can our society become more equitable and inclusive? Is the fundamental problem capitalism?
I think the fundamental problem is greed and laziness. It's not going to go over very well with people to say that out loud, but we really do need to shake off the sense that this is somebody else's job to save democracy. And the culture that we're in, consumer culture, celebrates greed. And I'm not saying by that making money is necessarily greedy.
No.
But capitalism as an organizing principle for making money is manageable if it's not made the boss of the world, right?
Capitalism without hoarding.
That's right. If you have a government that says, look, this is how you're taxed, these are the regulations you have to meet, then it becomes very clear to corporations where they're going to invest their money, how they're going to conduct themselves. What's happened since the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War has been that capitalism, and I relate this in the book, it's a theory that I first heard from a German political philosopher and economist named Ernst von Weizsäcker. But the capitalism has had its head since the end of the Cold War, has decided, sort of in a spirit of triumphalism, that communism lost, so capitalism won. And now we have the rise of a communist capitalist state in the People's Republic of China. We really need to start identifying what kind of economic policies we want, guided by what kind of goals do we have as a country. Do we want full employment? Do we want economic activity that's sustainable? Do we want students to be able to afford to go to university without emerging with a huge debt load? All of those things are required if we're going to have a sustainable economy. So it's not one thing or the other. It's got everything at once.
So we at The Link take real pride in reporting the news that often isn't reported.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have a lot of contact with the mainstream media. In your experience, where have they failed to cover environmental issues and complaints?
Well, they failed completely and utterly to cover almost any story worth covering. I mean, they haven't covered the robocall fraud to follow that through. They haven't covered the fact that the Prime Minister's office is increasingly gaining levels of power that are beyond what would be acceptable in any modern democracy, and certainly don't have anything to do with the Westminster parliamentary system we're supposed to have. And I think the problem isn't individual reporters. They're mostly fantastic. The problem is that the concentration of corporate ownership in our media has also resulted in a loss of the number of reporters. They're not allowed to concentrate and focus and have specialty areas anymore. Very few reporters have to cover everything, and 42 newspapers in this country are all owned by Post Media. So you get sort of a wire service kind of news coverage as opposed to somebody who's covering the city council beat who writes what was going on in their community. So one of the pieces of research I referenced in the book shows that newspapers, when they lose their Parliament Hill reporter, coverage in that community of voting goes down. But so does this also happen that you have less citizen engagement. Civic and political literacy and citizen engagement are critical, and they have a lot to do with a healthy news media. And so it's not the fault of the individual reporters by any means, but the system has become too concentrated. The corporate concentration of power in our news media right now is a scandal. It's a scandal, really. And it's great to have the link, but your listeners and viewers and people who are picking up the link, however you're disseminating it, need to know that we also have an obligation to educate the people who are still picking up the old-fashioned Montreal Gazette and Globe and Mail. They need to read letters to the editor that clue them into the fact that other things are happening that are not being covered in the pages of that paper.
Absolutely.